The night is alive, not with the wind, not with the rustle of leaves, but with eyes that watch, waiting just beyond sight. Somewhere in the darkness, shadows move with intent, circling, patient, relentless. Doors lock, windows shutter, but it doesn't matter. They are already here. Whispers echo where no one stands. Breaths brush against your skin, unseen yet certain. Tonight, you will feel what it is to be hunted, not by beasts, but by something older, something that remembers every fear you've ever had. The world you trust will fracture. Every step, every sound, every shadow could be the last. It was late autumn when I was sent to a dying town in northern Pennsylvania, a place that felt abandoned long before I arrived, as if something unseen had already claimed it. I worked in commercial refrigeration repair, drifting from one forgotten town to another, fixing what little still functioned. This assignment was supposed to last 3 nights. The town itself felt wrong. Stores shuttered before sunset, streets emptied too quickly, windows stared back like hollow eyes. It carried a stillness that didn't feel natural, as if the air itself whispered with something ancient, something watching. My company booked me into a roadside motel on the outskirts. It was the only place with vacancy. When I arrived, a little after 7 p.m., the sky had already dimmed into a bruised purple. The motel stood low and stretched, a single floor of rooms facing a cracked parking lot. Only a few cars were scattered outside, like forgotten relics. Inside the office, the smell hit me first. Stale coffee and harsh bleach, like someone was trying too hard to erase something that wouldn't go away. The woman behind the counter was in her 60s. She smiled politely, but her eyes kept drifting past me, toward the parking lot, as if something unseen might emerge from the darkness. Something not human. Something not human. As she handed me the key, her voice lowered, not quite a whisper, but close. "If anyone knocks on your door at night," she said slowly, "do not open it. Not unless it's me or the owner." There was a pause. "And if you hear anything strange outside," she added, her fingers tightening slightly on the counter, "call the office. Do not get involved." Her tone was casual, but something beneath it trembled, like she was repeating a rule carved from experience or fear. I asked if the area was dangerous. She hesitated. "Just drifters," she said finally. "They wander. Sometimes they ask for things." But her eyes said something else, something older, something darker, something that didn't belong to the living. I took the key and walked to my room at the far end, second to last. As I stepped out into the cold evening air, I felt it, that sensation, like crossing into a Makan Maloon, a cursed ground. And somewhere, unseen, something noticed me. My room sat near the far end of the motel, second to last. The air felt heavier there, as if the light struggled to reach it. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the room greeted me with a dull silence that felt occupied. It was clean, technically, but aged. Cigarette burns scarred the dresser like ritual markings. Dark stains spread across the carpet in uneven shapes, as if something had once seeped into it and refused to leave. The air carried a faint metallic scent beneath the detergent, subtle but wrong. I told myself I was just tired. After dropping my bag, I drove to a nearby gas station, grabbed some food, and returned around 8 p.m. The parking lot had grown darker, quieter, emptier. That's when I noticed the truck, an old dark green pickup. It sat 2 spaces away from my vehicle, its engine still running, but its headlights were off. The silence of the vehicle felt unnatural, like a beast holding its breath. Inside, a man sat behind the wheel, still, too still. His hands rested on the steering wheel, unmoving. His face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel it, his gaze. It wasn't curiosity, it wasn't normal, it was fixation. I walked past him, expecting some acknowledgement, a glance, a nod, anything human. Nothing. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't exist the way a normal person should. For a moment, a strange thought crossed my mind. Was he even alive? Or something else, wearing the shape of a man? I quickly brushed the thought aside and went into my room. Inside, I locked the door and turned on the TV, letting random noise fill the silence. I ate, trying to ignore the creeping sensation that something outside hadn't stopped watching me. Time passed. Around 10:30 p.m., I took a shower and went to bed. The motel had fallen into a deep, unnatural quiet. No distant traffic, no voices, just silence thick enough to feel. Then, footsteps outside my door. At first, I didn't think much of it. Other guests existed, after all. But the steps slowed, then stopped, right outside my door. I waited. No knock, no key turning, just stillness. A silence so complete, it felt like the world itself had paused. After several seconds, the footsteps resumed, moving away. I exhaled, but only for a moment, because a minute later, they returned, slower this time, dragging slightly, like something learning how to walk. They stopped outside my door again. No movement, no sound, just presence. My chest tightened. I got up quietly and pressed my eye against the peephole. Nothing. The walkway was empty. No shadow, no figure, no human being. Yet I knew something had been there. Something that didn't need to be seen. Something that moved like a djinn, silent, unseen, lingering between the edges of reality. I stepped back slowly, telling myself it was nothing, just a drunk guest, just my imagination. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. And somewhere beyond that door, something waited.
Sometime after 11 p.m., I was drifting in that half-sleep state where reality begins to blur, when the sound came. A knock. Soft, measured, too precise to be accidental. My eyes opened instantly. I didn't move. Another knock followed. Same rhythm, same force, like something mimicking the act rather than performing it naturally. A cold unease crept into my chest. Slowly, I got out of bed and moved toward the door, each step careful, controlled. The room felt colder now, like something unseen had entered its hudud, its boundaries. I leaned forward and looked through the peephole. Nothing. No one stood outside. The walkway was empty, bathed in dim, flickering light. But the feeling, that feeling didn't leave. It pressed against my skin like invisible fingers. I stood there longer than I should have, waiting, expecting something to appear. Nothing did. I locked the deadbolt again, even though it was already secured. My hands felt colder than they should have. As I turned away, something caught my eye. The curtain. It had shifted. Not wide enough to expose the outside, just enough to suggest that someone or something could have been looking in, watching, studying, memorizing. A chill crawled down my spine. I stepped forward and pulled the curtain fully shut, sealing the window like a barrier against whatever lingered outside. Then I turned off the lamp, letting darkness swallow the room. For the next 30 minutes, I lay in bed, eyes open, listening. Every sound felt amplified. Every silence felt intentional. Then, around midnight, a faint noise. Metal, scraping against metal. Not loud, careful, deliberate. It came from the door. My body went rigid. I moved again, slower this time, each step deliberate, like prey trying not to alert a predator. When I reached the door, I leaned in and looked through the peephole once more. This time, there was something. Movement. Low. Too low. At first, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. Then it became clear. Someone was crouched directly beneath the peephole, so close that I could only see the top of a dark baseball cap and part of a shoulder. They were hiding from my view. Hiding, but knowing exactly where to stand, as if they understood the limits of sight, as if they had done this before. My heart began to pound violently. I didn't breathe, didn't move, didn't exist. Seconds passed. Then, suddenly, the figure stood up. Too fast, too smooth, and vanished from sight. Footsteps followed immediately, quick, retreating, disappearing toward the far end of the building. I stumbled back from the door and grabbed my phone, dialing the office with shaking hands. The woman answered, her voice irritated at first. But the moment I told her someone had been outside my door, she went silent. A deep, unnatural silence. "Did you open it?" "No." "Good. Stay inside. Don't move." There was something in her voice now. Not annoyance, not surprise. Recognition. As if this wasn't new. As if this had happened before. Minutes later, headlights swept across my curtains, bright, invasive, cutting through the darkness like a blade. A vehicle moved slowly through the lot, then disappeared. The office called back. "No one's there now," she said. "Probably just someone messing around." But her tone betrayed her. She didn't believe that. Neither did I. Because I knew what I saw. And worse, I knew what I felt. That presence, that awareness, that thing outside my door. It hadn't just been trying to get in. It had been studying me. Like something ancient, something patient, something not entirely human. Something that moved like a jinn of the night, jinn of Dalam, feeding on fear, waiting for the right moment to cross the threshold. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over.
Sleep never truly came. When it did, it dragged me into shallow, fractured dreams, visions of footsteps outside, of something breathing just beyond the door. Every sound snapped me awake. Every shadow felt alive. Sometime around 3 a.m., exhaustion finally pulled me under. Then, a sharp electronic chirp. My truck alarm. My eyes shot open. For a moment, I didn't move. My body resisted, like it already knew something was wrong. Then, instinct took over. I got out of bed and moved toward the window, careful not to shift the curtain too much. Through the narrow gap, I saw him. A man standing beside my truck. The driver's door was open halfway. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket and a cap. His back faced me at first, his posture calm, too calm for someone breaking into a vehicle. Then, slowly, he turned. Not fully, just enough to look directly at my room, at me, even though I had barely moved the curtain, even though I was hidden. He knew. A cold wave passed through my body, like something unseen had brushed against my soul. Bard az-Zalam, the chill of darkness itself. He shut the truck door gently, not rushed, not panicked. Then he walked away toward the road behind the motel, disappearing like a shadow returning to where it belonged. I didn't hesitate this time. I called 911. The police arrived about 15 minutes later. They checked my truck. No damage, nothing missing. One officer asked if I was sure I had locked it. I knew I had, but the doubt in his voice made it worse. The older officer, though, he listened, really listened. When I told him about the knocking, the footsteps, the crouching figure outside my door, his expression shifted, not surprise, concern, recognition. He asked the motel owner about cameras. There were only two, one inside the office, one at the front entrance. Nothing covering my side of the lot, nothing where it mattered. Before leaving, the older officer pulled me aside. "If anything happens again," he said quietly, "don't open your door for any reason and leave in the morning." I asked if it was random. He nodded. Probably. But his eyes said something else, something heavier, something he wasn't saying out loud. Morning came, and with it a false sense of normalcy. The town looked ordinary again. The supermarket was busy. People talked, laughed, lived. For a few hours, I almost convinced myself that the night had been nothing more than exhaustion playing tricks on me. But something inside me remained unsettled, like a whisper that refused to fade. By the time I returned to the motel, darkness had already taken over again. I parked directly under the brightest light and carried all my tools inside at once. I wasn't going back outside, not again. The woman at the desk saw me. "You okay?" she asked. "I didn't sleep," I admitted. She hesitated, then said something that didn't sit right. "If you want, I can move you to room 2, closer to the office." I stared at her. "Why didn't you offer that last night?" Another pause. "I didn't think it was necessary." Then, almost as if something slipped out unintentionally, she added, "It usually doesn't happen 2 nights in a row." Silence filled the space between us. I felt something tightened in my chest. What does that mean? Her expression changed instantly, like someone who had revealed too much. "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just drifters. They move on." But I could feel it. She was hiding something, something older than excuses, something tied to that place, something that followed patterns, like a ritual, like an unseen presence marking its prey, alamat al-maut, the mark of death. That's when the realization hit me. This wasn't random. It had never been random. I wasn't just staying at that motel. I had been chosen. By the time night settled again, I was already on edge. Around 8 p.m., I brought food back to my room and locked myself inside. The air felt heavier than the night before, like something unseen had returned, and this time it wasn't alone. Then I heard it. A truck, slow, crawling through the parking lot like a predator circling prey. I pulled the curtain back just enough to see. The same dark green pickup. It moved past my room, turned near the road, and parked at the far end of the lot, lights off. Watching, waiting. I called the office again. This time, a man answered, the owner. I explained everything. He sounded annoyed. If it's not blocking you or damaging anything, there's nothing I can do, he said flatly. Do you know who it is? I asked. A pause. Then, people come and go. But his voice felt hollow, like he was avoiding something, or worse, accepting it. An hour passed. The truck didn't move. Eventually, I shut off the lights and lay in bed fully dressed, my phone in my hand. Sleep never came. Then, footsteps, slow, deliberate, dragging slightly. They moved outside my room again, but this time, they didn't stop at the door. They stopped at the window. A soft tap echoed against the glass. I froze. Another tap followed, closer to the center. Then, a long, slow scrape, like a fingernail dragging downward. My entire body went cold because I knew whoever or whatever was out there was standing inches away from me, and they knew I was inside, pretending to sleep. I reached for my phone, dialing 911, but before I could press call, the bathroom window rattled, a small frosted pane above the toilet. Then, a sound from the room next door, a lock being worked, not open normally, forced, slow, careful. That room had been empty, I knew it, but now something was inside, moving quietly, too quietly for a normal person. I crouched beside the shed wall, my heart pounding like a drum of war. I called 911 and whispered everything. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line. Then, a sudden hard udar against the wall, right behind the headboard, like someone testing it. Then another, lower this time, measuring, calculating. Silence followed. Then the worst sound of all, the bathroom window, opening, slowly, not rattling, opening. I ran to it and slammed it shut, pressing it with both hands. For a brief second, something pushed back from the outside, not strong, but undeniable. I locked it, though the latch felt useless, like trying to hold back something ancient with a fragile spell. Footsteps gathered outside my door now, more than one. Then the knocking returned, soft, patient, persistent. I grabbed a chair and jammed it under the doorknob, though deep down I knew if they wanted in, wood and metal wouldn't stop them. The dispatcher said officers were close. Then, headlights, bright, cutting through the darkness, immediately, running, multiple footsteps scattering into the night. Not one, not two, more. The police arrived within moments. They found the screen from my window removed and tossed into the bushes. Fresh pry marks scarred my truck door and the door of the room next to mine. They had been trying to get in from both sides, like hunters cornering prey. But the worst part came after. The older officer returned, pulled me aside, lowered his voice. "We've seen that truck before," he said. There had been others, men staying alone, out-of-town workers, watched, followed, targeted. In one case, someone tried to break into a vehicle. In another, a man woke up to his motel door already open, unlocked from the outside. Nothing was stolen. That was the part that mattered, because it meant the goal wasn't theft. It was something else, something darker, something unspeakable. I didn't ask further. I didn't need to. While packing, I dropped my charger. It slid under the bed. When I reached down to grab it, I saw something else. A folded piece of paper, hidden near the wall. I pulled it out.
It was part of a local newspaper torn into a square. On the back, my room number, my truck plate, written clearly, carefully, like a record, like a mark. Alemet al-Mukhtar, the mark of the chosen. They hadn't picked me at random. They had been watching, planning, waiting. I packed everything in silence. 2 officers stood outside as I left. I drove away before 1 a.m., not looking back, not once. I never returned, and I never will, because I know the truth now. That motel was never just a place to stay. It was a hunting ground, and something there, whether human or something far older, something like a wandering jinn bound to shadow and hunger, still waits, watching the empty rooms, waiting for the next traveler, the next name, the next mark.
Be cautious before hearing what comes next. Where are you listening from? Are goosebumps running down your spine? Comment below. New here? Subscribe now.
It began in October 2025. Back then, I was alone, but not afraid. Not yet. Loneliness has a way of whispering to you, pulling you toward places you shouldn't go. That's how I ended up downloading Tinder. It felt harmless, just a distraction, just something to fill the quiet hours. That's when the name appeared. Killian. Killian liked you back. I remember smiling. That was my first mistake. We started talking. At first, everything felt normal, easy even. He responded quickly, too quickly, like he was always there, always watching, waiting for my next message. Days turned into weeks, and then something shifted. His tone changed, possessive, controlling, wrong. He started saying things that didn't sound like affection. They sounded like ownership. You're mine. If I can't have you, no one can. And if you block me, I'll kill you. At first, I laughed it off. People say strange things online. But there was something in the way he wrote, something cold, something empty, like the words carried no emotion, only intent, like they were not warnings, but promises. It felt like I was speaking to something wearing a human mask. Qina el-insan. Something hollow behind the screen. Something that didn't understand love, only control. We never even dated, and yet he acted like I belonged to him. Then, one day in December, he disappeared, unfriended me. Gone, just like that. No explanation, no warning. And strangely, that silence felt worse than anything he had said before. Because silence, sometimes, means something is waiting. I moved on, tried to forget, tried to convince myself it had all been nothing more than a strange interaction with a disturbed person. Until a few days ago, he came back. The notification appeared like a curse resurfacing from the depths. Killian added you. My heart sank instantly. I remembered everything, the words, the threats, the way he spoke. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it, blocking him, disappearing. But fear makes you do things you wouldn't normally do. I added him back, because somewhere deep inside, I felt it. If I didn't, something worse would happen. Moments later, he sent a message. I've been thinking about your smile for 8 weeks. I keep imagining what we could have been if I didn't let my dark thoughts win. My hands felt cold as I typed back. That's cute. Not because I meant it, but because I didn't want to anger him. Because something inside me whispered, don't provoke him.
Don't wake whatever this is." From that moment on, the conversations resumed. But it wasn't normal. It was never normal. He asked where I was, who I was with, what I was doing, every hour, every moment. Like he wasn't just curious, like he needed to know, like something unseen was tracing my movements. Ayn el-Muraqib, the watcher's eye. Then came the request. "Turn on your Snapchat map," he said, "so I can make sure you're safe." Safe. The word felt twisted in his hands. I refused, politely, carefully, but deep down, I knew something had already begun. Something I couldn't stop, because this time, he wasn't just watching from a distance. He was getting closer, and something about him felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. Not just dangerous, not just obsessed, but something darker, something ancient, something that clung to people like a shadow, Dhil Multasiq, never letting go. And I didn't know it yet, but I had already been marked.
Days passed, but the feeling never left. That invisible pressure, like something watching me from just beyond sight. Ayn Khafiya, the unseen eye. Killian's messages became more frequent, more invasive. He asked the same questions again and again, as if trying to map my life piece by piece. Where are you right now? Who are you with? Why didn't you reply? Each message carried an edge, not loud, not aggressive, but controlled, calculated, like he was measuring me, testing boundaries. And every time I hesitated to answer, he would go quiet. That silence again, heavy, threatening, like something coiling in the dark. Then Thursday came, a night that felt normal until it wasn't. I had been out driving with a friend, just trying to forget everything. We stayed out late, past midnight, talking, laughing, pretending life was still simple. Around 1 a.m., he dropped me off near my house. The street was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't belong to sleep, but to something waiting. I thanked him, closed the car door, and walked toward the alley that led to my house. I had taken that path hundreds of times before. It was familiar, safe, or so I believed. The alley stretched ahead, dimly lit by a flickering street lamp. Shadows clung to the walls like stains that wouldn't wash away. The air felt cold, unnatural, like the breath of something lurking between the spaces. Halfway through, I saw him, a man standing in the darkness, still, watching. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe a neighbor, maybe someone passing through. Then, he said my name. My body froze. A cold shock ran through me. I didn't recognize the voice. "Who's asking?" I replied, my voice unsteady. He stepped forward, into the weak light, and that's when I saw his face. Killian. My heart didn't just drop, it collapsed. My lungs tightened, my skin turned cold. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but my legs refused to move. I had never given him my address, never told him where I lived. And yet, he was there, waiting, like he had always known, like he had been watching longer than I could imagine. Before I could react, he threw me to the ground. My head hit first. The world spun. Pain radiated through my body as I struggled to breathe.
gasping for air that wouldn't come. Before I could recover, he was on top of me, his weight pressing down like a curse. Then, a slap, sharp, violent. It echoed through the empty alley. My hand instinctively moved to my face as tears blurred my vision. And then, his hands returned to my throat, stronger this time, tighter, deadlier. The world around me began to fade. My vision darkened, my body weakened. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just someone obsessed. This wasn't just a man. This was something consumed by darkness, Shay Muslim, something that had crossed a line far beyond reason, something that didn't care if I lived or died. His grip tightened, stronger, colder. My world began to shrink into darkness. The alley disappeared. The walls, the ground, the sky, everything faded into a narrowing tunnel of black. My ears rang with a low, distant hum, like something ancient whispering from beneath the earth. Hamsel Mot, the whisper of death. I couldn't breathe. My body went weak. My hands barely moved as I tried to push him away, but it felt useless, like trying to escape something far beyond human strength. Tears streamed down my face, not from pain anymore, from the realization, this is how I die, right here, in the dark, alone. As my vision dimmed further, something strange happened. My thoughts slowed, then shifted. I wasn't thinking about him anymore. I wasn't thinking about fear. I was thinking about my dog. My old dog, the one I had lost. Memories flooded in, warm, soft, peaceful. I even felt something impossible, a faint smile, right as everything was about to disappear. Then, he let go. Suddenly, violently. Air rushed back into my lungs like fire. I collapsed onto the cold ground, coughing, gasping, dragging oxygen into my chest as if I had been underwater for hours. My body trembled uncontrollably. Above me, he stood still, looking down, watching. There was no regret in his eyes, no guilt, no hesitation, only emptiness, a hollow void, faragh Muslim, that swallowed all humanity. Then he spoke. Damn, I have to go. The last bus leaves in 3 minutes. Just like that, like nothing had happened, like my life had meant nothing. He turned and ran, vanishing into the darkness of the alley, leaving me broken on the ground, alone. I lay there for what felt like forever, my body unable to move, my throat burned with every breath. My vision slowly returned, but everything felt distant, unreal. Eventually, I forced myself to sit up. My hands were shaking. My entire body was shaking. I reached for my phone, called my best friend, but when he answered, I couldn't speak. My voice was gone. Only broken sounds came out, distorted, desperate, unrecognizable. My vocal cords had been crushed under his grip. He didn't understand what I was saying, but he understood enough. I'm coming, he said. I don't remember much after that. Only fragments. Getting up, stumbling, reaching his house, collapsing on the couch. And then, darkness. Not fear this time, just exhaustion. I fell asleep within minutes, my body finally shutting down after the trauma it had endured. But while I slept, things were already moving, because somewhere out there, Killian wasn't finished, and whatever darkness lived inside him had only just begun to show itself. When I woke up, the world felt distant, unreal. My throat burned with every breath. Speaking was impossible. Only a faint, broken rasp escaped my lips. My body ached like it had been dragged through something violent. I didn't remember telling him to, but deep down I knew. He must have heard enough in those broken sounds, enough to understand that something had tried to end me. Later that day, he drove me to the station. The entire ride felt like moving through fog. Every shadow outside the window felt alive. Every passing stranger felt like a watcher. Ein Azil, the eye of the shadow. At the station, I gave my statement, or tried to. My voice barely worked, so most of it came out in whispers and gestures. Still, they listened carefully, more carefully than I expected. Too carefully. When I described him, Killian, the officers exchanged looks, subtle but noticeable, like they understood something I didn't. After questioning, one of them pulled me aside. His tone was serious, measured. "You are not safe." The words landed heavier than anything else that day. Not safe. Not might be in danger, not could happen again, but certain, absolute, like a verdict already written. They issued me a personal alarm device, a small object, simple in appearance, but powerful in purpose. One press, and it would send my location directly to the police. A lifeline, or perhaps a last chance. Because even they knew this wasn't over. 3 days passed. I stayed inside as much as I could. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow stretched longer than it should. And then it happened again. I was outside, not far from home. That same feeling returned. The same suffocating awareness, like something was behind me. Following, watching. I turned, and I saw him. Not Killian, but someone else, a man, standing at a distance, watching me too closely, too deliberately. My heart began to race. I started walking faster. He followed, not rushing, not hiding, just keeping pace, like a silent extension of something darker. Like a messenger, Rasul Az-Zalam, sent from the same source. That's when I realized Killian wasn't alone. He never was. Panic surged through me. I pulled out my phone, ready to trigger the alarm, but before I could, a car pulled up nearby. My friend, right on time. I rushed into the vehicle, locking the door behind me. As we drove away, I looked back. The man was still there, standing, watching, not chasing, not reacting, just observing, like he already knew something I didn't, something inevitable. Later, the police confirmed it, the truth I had been trying to avoid. Killian's intention was to kill me, not scare me, not control me, kill me. And if things had gone slightly differently that night, if he had a car, if the bus hadn't been leaving, if I had been alone just a little longer, I wouldn't be here. That thought never left me, even now, because the worst part isn't what already happened, it's what might still happen, because people like him, they don't stop, and whatever darkness lives inside them, Ruh Muslima, doesn't forget, doesn't forgive, and doesn't let go. I realized then, this wasn't just survival anymore. This was a hunt, and I had already been marked. I thought leaving the alley alive was the end, but it wasn't. Every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes on me, always watching, silent, patient. Killian had promised he would always be there, and I believed him now with every trembling cell in my body. Days blurred into night. The tracking device and alarm gave me a fragile sense of safety, but it was only a veneer. I could feel the shadow of him, Ruh Qatila, the lethal spirit, lurking just beyond sight, shaping the darkness around me. 3 days ago, I saw it clearly. Not Killian himself, but one of his allies, another dark figure, standing across the street. Their stare was sharp, precise. The way they lingered, I knew. They were mapping, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment. I had friends, police protection, alarms, but it felt useless against someone who had mastered the art of patience and darkness. The night comes and I can't sleep. Every whisper of wind is his breath. Every creak of the floor is his step. My own shadow feels hostile, like even the light conspires to hide him. I realize that no matter how careful I am, no matter how many barriers I put between us, the darkness has a way of reaching me. It bends, it hides, it watches. One night I might step outside, and he will be there again, waiting in the shadows. And maybe, this time, I won't trigger the alarm fast enough. Maybe this time, I won't survive. I'm not just living in fear. I'm living hunted, marked, and I know deep in my bones that this shadow, this Ruh Muslima, never sleeps. I only hope if it comes to that night, someone else sees the story I leave behind. So listen to me, whoever reads this. Be vigilant, be careful. The darkness doesn't need a reason to strike, because sometimes it is enough just to choose you. Be cautious before hearing what comes next. Where are you listening from? Are goosebumps running down your spine? Comment below. New here? Subscribe now. October's sky was heavy, bruised with the approaching night as I drove toward the Smoky Mountains. I had wanted a solo escape, quiet, solitary, away from the burdens of the world. The kind of isolation that whispers secrets to your soul. I had camped alone before, but that day, something felt different. Before reaching the park, I stopped at a small roadside diner. The place was almost empty. A few aged patrons stared silently into steaming cups of coffee, and the waitress moved like a shadow, worn by years. I ordered a burger and fries, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something watched me from across the counter. A man sat a few stools down. He wasn't overtly threatening, but every glance he threw my way carried a weight, an unnerving patience, like he was measuring me. When he finally spoke, it wasn't with warmth or curiosity. "Where are you headed?" he asked. I told him I was going camping. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, then said, "Be careful. It gets real quiet out there at night." The words crawled along my spine, embedding themselves deep in my bones. I forced a smile, thanked him, and left, trying to dismiss the foreboding aura that clung to him. By late afternoon, I reached a secluded trailhead, a lone dirt parking lot, no other cars around. The silence pressed against me like a living thing. My backpack felt heavier than usual. The air was thick, almost viscous, carrying a smell of moss and old earth. I hiked in, the path winding between ancient trees whose branches clawed at the fading light. The woods were alive with the sounds of insects and the rustle of leaves, but there was something else, something that didn't belong. Footsteps, deliberate, slow, and unyielding, crunching faintly on the dead foliage. I paused. Nothing. I pressed on, convincing myself it was my imagination. Eventually, I found a small clearing, perfectly flat, enough space for a tent and a fire. But the shadow of the forest seemed to stretch unnaturally around the perimeter, like unseen eyes were waiting just beyond sight. I set up my camp as quickly as possible, trying to beat the darkness. By the time my tent was up, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the world in a gray, suffocating twilight. I lit a small fire. The flames flickered against the trees, casting long, trembling shadows. For a brief moment, the world felt normal. The fire crackled. I made s'mores. I listened to the natural sounds of the forest. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not the rustle of wind, not the scurry of animals. Human, measured, watching. I looked up and saw a man about 30 feet away, standing between the trees, completely still, facing me. The firelight barely touched his features, but I felt the weight of his gaze deep in my chest. I lied. "No, my friends are meeting me soon." His eyes didn't betray disbelief. He just nodded slowly, then turned and melted into the darkness of the forest. But the unease lingered. The way he moved, the way he watched, it felt ritualistic, as if he had performed this hunt many times before. I sat by my fire, tense, pretending to check my phone. I didn't want him to know I was aware. Yet, even as the night deepened, I felt it. The invisible threads of his presence curling around my campsite. He didn't leave, not completely. And the forest, it seemed darker than it should have been, like something had awakened just for me. Night swallowed the forest whole, leaving only the glow of my small fire as a fragile island of light. Every crackle of wood sounded like a shout in the silence. My heartbeat pounded like a drum of warning. The steps I had heard before, they were back. Slow, measured, encircling my tent. Leaves crunched softly under deliberate weight, as if someone or something was mapping the perimeter of my fragile sanctuary. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't realize I was awake. The cold night air tasted like iron and dust, thick with the scent of moss and something darker, Ruh Gamida, a mysterious presence pressing on my senses. Minutes stretched like hours. The figure I had seen earlier hadn't returned fully, but I could feel him in the shadows, watching, unseen yet palpable. My mind raced, trying to rationalize. A lost hiker? Some deranged camper? But instinct screamed, this wasn't random. This was intentional, calculated. The wind shifted, and I caught a glimpse of movement between the trees, a black silhouette standing just beyond the firelight. Its posture was unnervingly still, almost ritualistic, not human, not entirely. It exuded an aura that made my skin crawl. Jinn, I thought fleetingly, the word from some half-forgotten Arabic tale surfacing unbidden. Could it be? I clutched my flashlight like a talisman, waving it briefly toward the shadow. Nothing. The figure didn't move, didn't react, just observed. Every instinct screamed to run, but I couldn't risk leaving the fire or tent unattended. Hours passed like this. The forest breathed around me. I could hear the faintest of whispers, wind, or the sibilant hiss of unseen watchers. The fire dwindled, yet I felt the darkness pressing closer, shadows crawling over the edges of my vision. The figure had vanished, or perhaps it had merged with the blackness, waiting for me to lower my guard. Sleep was impossible. Every nerve in my body screamed, alert, aware. I had set up the tent for shelter, but it felt like a fragile cage. Every creak, every distant snapping twig set me on edge. And then, faint but unmistakable, a breath, slow and deliberate, right outside the thin fabric of the tent. Not the wind, not my imagination. Someone was there, watching, studying, patiently waiting. I held my breath, wishing I could vanish. But the shadows had already chosen me, and whatever lurked beyond the veil of trees, it was not done.
The night extended endlessly, a black ocean pressing down from all sides. I lay in my tent, heart hammering, every nerve screaming that I was not alone. The footsteps, soft, deliberate, moved in a slow, circular pattern around my campsite. I could hear them, faint but unmistakable, crunching leaves in a rhythm that was almost ritualistic. I didn't move. I couldn't. Even the slightest sound might betray me to whatever watched. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of wet earth and something far older, something high, alive with unseen malevolence. The hairs on my arms and neck stood on end as though invisible fingers traced my spine. I tried to convince myself it was one person, maybe two, curious campers playing some twisted game, but instinct screamed differently. The steps, they weren't just moving, they were circling, measuring, assessing. There was a precision to it, a patience that no human would maintain without reason. I pressed my face to the tent fabric, straining to see through the dim shapes of the trees. In the shadows, a figure, or many, stood perfectly still. I could not discern faces, only the black outlines, faint yet terrifying. Jinn, I whispered in my mind again, Arabic tales of wandering spirits and watchers surfacing in my panic. Could these beings be some manifestation of that ancient fear? Then came a pause, silence, that suffocating, almost sacred silence that makes the skin crawl. I could feel their eyes, hundreds of them, focused, waiting. My breath hitched, and I prayed they could not sense it. After what felt like eternity, I heard the first soft snap of a twig, then another, then multiple sets of footsteps retreating slowly into the darkness, fading like smoke. My body didn't relax. I was too aware that the retreat was not departure. It was patience. They would return, because they were not hunters who left empty-handed. They were something older, observing, learning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike.
I stayed awake, frozen, listening to every sound, every whisper of wind. My fire was out, my mind racing, every shadow now a threat. The forest itself seemed complicit, swallowing the edges of light, holding me hostage in its ancient, djinn-haunted embrace. And as the first faint light of dawn began to leak through the canopy, I knew with a sickening certainty I had survived the night, but I was not safe. They were still there, watching, waiting. The sun rose weakly, its pale light failing to penetrate the oppressive shadows that still clung to the forest floor. My entire body ached, not just from tension, but from fear that had turned muscle and nerve to stone. Every rustle, every distant bird call set my heart racing. I knew I hadn't imagined the night's horrors. I packed my belongings with trembling hands, leaving nothing to chance. Every step toward my car felt like treading through quicksand. The forest seemed to shift around me, the shadows stretching unnaturally, as if alive, keeping pace with my frantic pace. When I reached the clearing where I had camped, the sight that met me froze the last of my courage. My tent gone, my sleeping bag gone. Even the small cooking supplies I had left scattered were gone, vanished as if some unseen hand had plucked them from the earth. Only the black circle of ashes from my fire remained, mocking me. I scanned the surrounding trees, every shadow, every hollow, every gnarled root. Nothing moved, yet I could feel them. Hundreds of eyes hidden in the darkness, still watching. I had been far too close to whatever lurked here, and now my vulnerability was laid bare. I ran, stumbling, my hands clutching what little I had managed to salvage. Every snap of a branch behind me made me jump, but I didn't dare look back. The footsteps from the night, their silent, measured menace were gone, but I knew that didn't mean freedom. They were patient. They would wait for another night, another chance. Finally, I reached my car, locked the doors, and sank into the seat, hands shaking uncontrollably. The forest behind me loomed like a dark citadel, hiding the watchers who had tested me. I didn't report what happened. I didn't try to reclaim anything. Survival had become my only concern. And somewhere deep in the trees, I knew the shadows waited, silent, relentless, hungry for the next nightfall. I drove blindly through the forest roads, heart hammering like a drum of doom. Every shadow along the roadside seemed alive, every flicker of movement a potential predator. The gear, the tent, the fire, none of it mattered anymore. Only one thought consumed me: escape. Even in daylight, I could feel them, the watchers, their presence pressed against the edges of my perception, a whispering, invisible threat that refused to release me. My mind clung to rational explanations, yet deep down I knew the truth. They were not human, not entirely. The djinn or some other ancient force had claimed this forest, marking me as an intruder in their domain. I vowed never to return, alone, ever. The simple act of camping had transformed into a ritual of survival. I replayed every sound, every shadow, every movement, questioning my senses, my sanity. But the black circle of ashes burned in my memory, a silent testament to the night's terror. At home, the fear didn't fade. Every rustle of leaves outside my house, every car that slowed near my house, made my pulse spike. The forest had followed me in some way, or perhaps the watchers had found ways to linger in the spaces between. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't relax. I was constantly alert, haunted not only by what I had seen, but by what remained unseen. And sometimes, when the wind whistles through the trees and the shadows lengthen in the corners of my vision, I remember the circling footsteps, the cold, patient gaze, and I know they are still out there, waiting, watching, and if I ever step foot into those mountains again, I might not survive the night. The forest had won my innocence, and I was forever marked.
This is the end of today's terrifying incident. The clock keeps ticking, and the mystery keeps breathing. Subscribe now for more horror-filled nights, if you're not afraid.